Good morning, good afternoon, and evening, baseball fans. Welcome back to the Barstool Baseball Show. This is Carl, and I am joined by Lights Camera Castellani. I'm fresh off in Oppenheimer. You look like you just saw a movie. You've been waiting to see something that moved you emotionally. I know I don't want the nuts and bolts of the review, but give me some positive energy here. You feel good about this movie, don't you?
Peak prime Christopher Nolan. Everyone should go out and see it and support it. It is a director in the heart of his peak. To me, he was already there, but finalizing a first ballot Hall of Fame resume with Oppenheimer. So is it my favorite movie of his? No, but it will be one of the front runners for Best Picture come Oscar time. And
we spent time in the green screen room before. I didn't say a word about it. I just felt it. I knew it. I felt it. I see the hair slick back. This is a roundup show. Traditionally, we've done Friday American League, Wednesday National League. We had Hale Morris join this Wednesday with me and Clemmer for a great conversation in and out of the front office stuff, modern day scouting, the 2023 Cincinnati Reds. I think it's fair, though. We can flex a little bit more on Friday. We're comfortable. We can kind of step outside of the boundaries a little bit. There's some stuff I wanted to add to the roster. So we've got a great list of stuff. We're coming off the Orioles and the Rays just played a wonderful game. Jared Kelenic had a horrible mistake. Some local stuff with the Tigers, which doesn't make the roster very often, but authentically, I want to talk about Anthony Rizzo, Andrew Abbott, and this MLB announcer list. I want to talk about a bunch of stuff with you. It's Major League Baseball before the trade deadline. You are a diehard, so I guess just like generally on the calendar, on the timeline, how would you put mid-July in your brain as a baseball fan? Compared to other parts in the baseball calendar?
Well, I have to break it up into two separate periods of my life because 06 to 2014, the trade deadline was Christmas for me because you had Riverboat fucking Dave Dombrowski on the move, going out and getting his guys. I would say post 2016, it's taken on a different form, the constant rebuilding, constant selling. But I think that far and away, one of the most fascinating things in sports is the Major League Baseball trade deadline, just because there's no minor league system in football. You know what I mean? You trade guys directly. If you're going to dump guys, you do it for salary cap purposes, what have you. I think this year especially, and really with the last couple of years being what they are, I think the Major League trade deadline is becoming in a lot of ways kind of must-watch television. I guess I don't know whatever the Twitter equivalent of must-see TV is. I feel like that's kind of what the deadline is now because every year there's going to be a lot of big names available. But even in the modern age with 12 teams now going to the postseason, you have more buyers. Now, I think you probably have an equal amount of sellers, which makes the market much more interesting. But I do look forward to it every year. My perspective about it has changed a little bit over the last 7 years or so with my team being more likely to unload assets. But I think that outside of opening day, the trade deadline bizarrely is the most hopeful day of the year for Major League Baseball teams. Because if you're a bad team, hopefully you come out of it and say, hey, we replenished our system, future's bright, we're in good shape. And if you're a good team, you can come out of it and say, let's go win the whole fucking thing. It's an exciting time.
I wonder what Major League Baseball thinks of the trade deadline. I wonder what, now that Theo Epstein is in the commissioner's booth and stuff, if you ask Theo Epstein, do you think the CC Sabathia trade for Matt Laporte and all that stuff, do you think that's reflective when we say, oh my God, we love the trade deadline for big stuff? Or do you think people who are stewards of the game would say, historically speaking, the trade deadline has done more harm than good? Carlos Beltran's a good example of a great trade, right? You'd go back and do that trade all over again. I know the Mets didn't make it to the World Series or there's plenty of examples, but there's also just way more examples of it going south. So a true objective steward of the game, because Theo obviously wanted to weed out how long it is. That worked well. So the more playoff teams through the wild card, I'm just interested if there was a tertiary, a really low consideration of the nice thing too of more playoff teams is we will see less prospects get traded from before they get to the big leagues.
I guess the one downside to me is that I think there's certain teams that feel a need to sell. Like when they get to a certain point where maybe they're close to contention, maybe they're kind of in the middle, and it's like, well, fuck it, we got to unload assets because we got to do something. I think that teams nowadays feel a bizarre pressure not to stand pat. I mean, almost, I can't recall of any team in recent memory, whether they were out of it or a contender, that didn't do something at the deadline, which can make it a little bit more fun. But I would also argue that some teams have a tendency to set themselves back with the constant unloading. Like I think like the Pirates are a prime example of that, where they went for it one time. It resulted in the Chris Archer trade. Every other time it's unload, unload, unload. Well, in the long run, you're going to, no matter what pieces you get back, you're going to end up looking back on it and being like, God, we got rid of a lot of good players. So I guess in certain markets, it is a downside.
But I want to stay on this track for a second here, because I do think the trade deadline, when we say unload, okay, so like the Pirates trading Aramis Ramirez is like obviously just ridiculous fucking thing in their history book. However, like when the Cubs trade Paul Maholm in his 9th year after they signed him for $2.5 million and they flip him for a AA. So I think there's like different concepts. Are we trading guys that we brought up into the major leagues, or did we go out and, like, Eduardo Rodriguez is the perfect example of what I'm talking about, where the front office makes a budget conscious signing for a player with high upside and then goes and trades him for a boatload of players later. They know for a fact. It's like, hey, Eduardo Rodriguez is we are signing you in order to trade you for more prospect capital.
Yeah, well, in his case, I think Avila signed him in the hopes of this is going to be one of the centerpieces of a new era. It obviously tanked, but I think Scott Harris came into this year being like, if he pitches well, he's gonna be gone. We're in an awkward position, and that's exactly what he's done. So I think it really varies per GM, it varies per tenure, and it's ultimately it is when you are a bad team, it is a massive risk because you are trading for unproven commodities. Now, every so often you have those deadlines you look back on and say, God, they built an entire core around 3 trades. But it is a time in which you have to take a risk, and if you want to get better, whether it's in the short term or long term gain.
If I was a GM, I would sign every like former great closer, as many as I could get. Like anybody who had racked up like an all-star appearance, saves, a great early start to their career, I would just sign as many of those guys as possible and give them as many as opportunity. If I was in rebuild phase or whatever, because I feel like this is the time of the year where teams are always coming across and being like, man, we would do anything for bullpen help. And that's why shitty rebuilding teams, it's like, well, you play in meaningless games, so you have so many opportunities to throw relievers in meaningless opportunities where they can look great and feel great.
Well, dude, look at what the Royals did this year with Aroldis Chapman.
Exactly.
I mean, dude, they traded him in like fucking late May, early June. Okay, it might have been early this month of being hyperbolic, but it was like the second they knew, oh shit, he's throwing 103 again. Bye. Like we'll see you around, man, and who knows what the return will look like. But yeah, I mean, I think it's weird because you would assume great hitters would get the greatest return at the deadline, but I feel like in the modern age, it's teams are more willing to sell out for really good starting pitching and bullpen depth. It seems like in the modern age is in large part because those are often the contracts, especially relievers, that don't cripple you. I mean, I don't even know how much Aroldis Chapman was getting paid, but the Royals ain't spending a ton of money on Chapman. So I think that it's that narrative's kind of changed where it's more so about trading contracts necessarily as opposed to trading players.
Now, as we get into this trade deadline stuff, there's a very great series going on now. The Orioles and the Rays, they just played to 10 innings. You and I were going to record before this, and then it was a 3-3 game. The Orioles come out with a win. They are now in first place in the American League East. We are vindicated with their number 2 spot in the power ranking. Go listen to the Monday show.
Yeah,
it's a great series. Both teams should be adding at the trade deadline.
And they will. And I think especially, I've said, I mean, even going back to like May, my fear is Baltimore is afraid to jump into deep waters. It's like, dude, I'm telling you, they have a squad that can do some really special things this year. I do have one question, though, I want to ask about the Tampa Bay Rays that may incite some controversy, but I think it's fair. I'm not talking about me and you collectively. I mean nationally. Do we baby the Tampa Bay Rays? I feel like we often avoid very justifiable criticism because they're this small market little team that could a group that obviously overshoots their win total every year. But you know what? They started this year red hot, and they have some really good players. And they still look, if they added the deadline, and if they come out of this thing and win the World Series this year, no one's going to be talking about it. But I feel like if this was any other organization, we would say, okay, it's a team that's made it to 2 World Series, one in the COVID year. They never spend money at all. They have a ton of pitching injuries. And outside of the COVID year, which the deeper we get becomes more and more fugazi, they haven't made it past the ALDS since 2008. Carl, do we have a tendency to give them a free pass that maybe they haven't earned?
Okay, so I like where you're going. Free pass. Are we giving them a free pass? Okay. I also think, to a certain extent, baseball's different in that I want something to follow for the season. Mm-hmm. I want something to care about on a day-to-day basis. And I think at its core, that's what the Rays do very well and have done now. The problem is when we get to playoff stuff. And this is one of the things that I loved. I learned from Theo when he came in and he started doing his press conferences, and you get to follow him. And it was just so fucking awesome to be, let's see, you're like in your early 20s, and here comes Theo Epstein, and like, all right, this is my model. This is my philosophy. And he was very adamant about winning your division championship, because the playoffs in baseball are just, it's all momentum and so much injury volatility. And, a lot of it is just who's hot in the starting pitching, et cetera. There has to be like that's why I love that we separate postseason statistics too so much, because it's like, it's just a completely different beast. And the Rays aren't necessarily built for that beast. They're built for the 162, just like kind of the Oakland A's. Did we glorify the A's too much?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a very similar principle there where we always say, like, that they did change the game. And from a philosophy standpoint, when we're talking about their incorporation of analytics, they did. But the one thing that, that the Moneyball film cuts off in 2002, the Oakland A's, for their entire existence in that era in the 21st century, two. They won one in the COVID year, one actual playoff series, and they followed it up by getting swept by Detroit. I guess the one stipulation I have with the Rays is that I think they present themselves as a team that is completely incapable of spending money. I think that they choose not to spend money. Now, I'm not saying they could spend like Steve Cohen, but I do think that they kind of hide behind this whole, well, there's nothing we can do. It's like, no, you play in a bigger market than you think. You could spend more cash than you do. And then when they lose in the ALDS, they kind of shrug their shoulders and say, what are we going to do? Where there's other teams that have taken, much bigger swings that get way more criticism than they do in October.
Yeah, I just would then go back and say, how much more would they have to do to then be competitive on paper with the Astros going into October? And the Astros, the answer to that question with the Astros, I think, is quite a bit.
For sure.
And from the perspective of winning a World Series, the cost to get to that point, whereas they are projected to be in this space for quite some time now.
Oh, for sure. And I think I'm probably being overly critical. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization. And in many ways, in the last 5-6 years or so, they have become a model organization in terms of their consistency through the 162. I just think that there's a lot of teams, and people can say it's unfair because one team has way more money, but like, we constantly rail on the Yankees for their postseason failures. They have been substantially more successful excluding the COVID year, than the Rays have in the last 14, 15 years. And yet we constantly say, another October choke job, but we never say that with the Rays. The Rays have the best.
That is entirely a clickbait and a $30 million contract plus to Aaron Judge and every dollar. Come on. The Yankees moved the needle.
You are right. You are right. But like, I'll say 2 years ago, the Rays had the best record in the American League. They won 101 games. They obviously, this was before the expanded postseason, and they played a 90-something win Red Sox team that was inferior to them, did not play well in a 4-game set, and we all just kind of looked at it and went, oh man, it's too bad. When I think any other team, you'd say, it's a real disappointment. You had a great year and you fell apart in October. And the reason I'm saying this is because I think if they end up coughing up what was at one point a huge divisional lead, I think they probably would deserve like a fair ripping for that. Now we're a far ways away. They're going to find a way to rally and regroup. McClanahan's already back. It's a great team, but I think sometimes we overlook some legit flaws.
Well said.
Thank you.
From a guy who wishes his team would do both of those things, spend money, but at least be as good as the Rays are, but then go spend money. But I will give you guys credit now. Is Michael Lorenzen getting traded?
I believe he will be. And
okay, now here's what I love about Michael Lorenzen quickly. He was a two-way guy at Cal State Fullerton. Mm-hmm. And what you got to like about Cal State Fullerton, you got to understand Cal State Fullerton guys are different guys. Mark Kotze is a Cal State Fullerton guy. Well, you go down the list. A lot of them didn't make it. Christian Colon, I'm sorry to say it, Jared Parker. But the core of being a Cal State Fullerton guy is UCLA has amazing facilities. USC has amazing facilities. Cal State Fullerton, you got to like change in the parking lot. And not necessarily, but the clubhouse is now it's been rehabbed and all that BS. But like when Lorenzen was coming up, it wasn't. It's a commuter school. It's in the middle of nowhere, but I shouldn't say in the middle of nowhere. It is in Orange County, but within relative to what California baseball has to offer. And so you just love guys like Michael Lorenzen that come up through the Cal State Fullerton program into Major League Baseball, and he's a two-way guy.
Yeah.
Like he was a center fielder. Like he just started to learn how to pitch when he got to the professional ranks. You know, he was their leadoff. Yeah. He was the leadoff hitter. He stole a bunch of bases, and he's just a badass. He'd wear the eye black smeared down his face before anybody else was doing shit like that with the stirrups. So just as a baseball guy, like Michael Lorenzen's so fucking cool. Now, when he got to pro ball, he turned into like a health and fitness he's so jacked out of his mind
good shape.
Now.
He's in phenomenal shape. And I think that he has benefited a lot from the new rules because he's a tremendous athlete at heart. He does no concerns about conditioning with Michael Lorenzen. He gets the ball, he's ready to fire it.
Now, Michael Lorenzen got named All-Star. It was a great story because he was like, I would not name myself.
Right. Yeah. No,
this is like a career, like first, second, third supplemental rounder, career Team USA guy, Cape Cod. It's just funny that like even at this point in his career, it's like, yeah, dude, I wouldn't make myself an all-star either. Au contraire, my friend, what's his scoreless streak now since making these comments?
Since the all-star selection, 18 2/3 scoreless innings, 3 consecutive scoreless outings. Would have been more. AJ pulled him after 5 in a start against Oakland because he wanted him to pitch in the all-star game, essentially. His ERA since then, I believe, has gone from 4.2 something to 3.49. He pounds the zone. He throws a ton of strikes. And he can give somebody tremendous value at the deadline. And I mean, on a personal level, it makes me happy because, for one, it says Scott Harris has a good eye for talent. Like, we had so many one-year deals in the Avila era that just tanked. This guy comes in right away. He's pitched really well. And like you said, very well respected across the league. Good athlete, very good clubhouse guy. He'll be one of those guys who will get traded at the deadline, and he'll pitch 4 ERA baseball, but he'll have that one start when you're a game up with 5 games to go, and he's going to go 7 scoreless, and you're going to look back on that trade and be like, that worked out for us, man. Lorenzen gave us that one start against Seattle that helped us win the division. So I'm happy for him. He's kept his head down. He's saying nothing but Detroit's praises since being here, and he's also, I mean, in a bizarre way, for a guy who's been in the league, because I think his first year was 2015. He doesn't have as many city miles on him as you'd think because he spent a lot of time in the bullpen. So I could see something, even beyond this year, something of a resurgence for him of some teams being like, you know, this guy's stuff is good. He doesn't walk a lot of hitters, and he doesn't have the leverage in terms of innings that some other guys do. So, yeah, it's been
he's also in much better shape than most pitchers. Yeah, like it's not just the lack of mileage. It's that the
yeah. And he's another guy. He's another guy too that's fallen into the sweeper craze as well. Like he's really developed that pitch quite a bit. It's kind of really helped advance his career.
Well, certainly athletic enough to then take the data. And we talked with Hal Morris about this. Like, how do you quantify that? Like, or if you're scouting a player or trying to figure out a player, like, is this somebody now that adapts well to learning data? And he goes, it's all about athleticism. With how fast the game's changing, we're going back. I want to watch you play basketball. I want to watch you play football. I want to know at your core, how much of an athlete are you? If you're just blowing guys away in high school, that's completely different. Now, it's interesting you bring up the sweeper because at his core, Lorenzen is just a pure athlete. You talked about that right away.
No.
He's just a fucking pure athlete. So then to say this sweeper's a new pitch.
Yeah.
So that's the type of guy who could pick up on it and, you know, start implementing it right away. We have the sweeper in mind. I'm going to press fast forward. And like I said, typically Fridays are American League, but I wanted to round up. I wanted to throw Andrew Abbott in the mix and talk about him with you because, again, we talked about him with Hale Morris, and he was like, listen, this guy's a game 1 starter in a playoff series. He can go out and dominate. He did it again today, dominated. He's been very dominant. And something that's interesting about him is through whatever it is, 12, 13 starts, I think 45 innings, 51 strikeouts, a 2.2 ERA, 2.21 ERA, something like that. Something significant enough to be like, all right, the Reds have a guy that can go at the top.
Yeah.
The sweeper, he throws his sweeper more than he throws his curveball, and his curveball grades out in like the top 5% on StatCast. And his StatCast comparable, like the best StatCast I could find for him for left-handed starting pitching was Shane McClanahan. So like we're not talking about and McClanahan has way more fastball velocity. But if you have a minute, I'll dress this up. Please pull them up side by side. I was interested in expected on base against, which is extremely low. Mm-hmm. I was interested in barrel rate, which is extremely low. He doesn't throw an overpowering fastball. I believe it's below 50%, but his extension, meaning like how far is he out there and what's that release look like, is in the top 10%. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. I reached through my camera right here and almost scratched it. So what do you have these up?
Are you talking his Baseball Savant page, just like the batted ball data? I can get it. Abbott's right here.
Yeah, StatCast. Him and McClanahan in the StatCast on Baseball Savant are as close as I could find. And I brought that up because now that the sweeper is a pitch, I believe Andrew Abbott, now breaking into the league as a prospect, like he came into the league with a sweeper, which is interesting to me. A lot of guys have added it. So,
is it one of those things that is the sweeper one of those pitches that was, it sounds weird to put it this way, had developed like something of an underground following in the minors before recently this year becoming something that was kind of a sensation at the major league levels? Like, is that how that stuff starts? Is it's in the minor leagues, then guys bring it to the majors? Or is it the reverse where it starts off the major league level and guys incorporate it in the minor leagues?
Yeah, it's some guy that's been in the minor leagues for like 6 or 7 years. That's in a facility in a warehouse in the back of a parking lot with some JUCO guy who's sitting there and the whole, like they all got all the cameras out and the spin things. And they're like, all right, now what if you drop down just like a little bit and then just like, I think the concept of the sweeper is to emphasize horizontal movement and to say, because if you were throwing a slider, you know, historically speaking, a pitching coach is going to coach that slider into depth and be like, you want 2-plane break on that. You want it breaking obviously horizontally, but you want late depth and bite to it. That's an extremely hard pitch to execute without blowing your fucking elbow out. You know, you really got to sell out to throw a good, nasty, hard slider with depth. And so I think what you found is a lot of guys have gone to the cutter. And not to say, hey, the slider's out. Like, I'm just saying, if you're going out to the mound with a fucking slider and think you're going to snap that thing off for 33 starts 10 years in a row. Yeah. So I think guys have gone more to the cutter too as a health thing. Now, along the way, what they've added with information is that a lot of hitters, like Juan Soto went through this, and this is where like the sweeper had really caught my attention, is that like Juan Soto's swing path analyzed on a horizontal level. The more horizontal break a pitch had, the lower his OPS was. And so I think teams now have that type of data against hitters. And so the concept as a pitcher of like, listen, I am willing to sacrifice depth, meaning up and down. I'm willing to give up that downward to create more lateral movement. Now, how do I do that without fucking completely giving it away? Because to do that physically would mean, you know, you're really pronating and spinning your hand around. So I would imagine there's a lot of manipulation to learning a sweeper, but athletically, it would be intuitive that like it's just more horizontal of a breaking pitch with an emphasis and intent of that, where typically a pitching coach would be like, hey, we don't want all that bullshit. We want fucking depth. Right. You know, and you're like, all right. But now they're like, hey, we don't care about swing and miss as much as we care about missing barrels.
Somewhere there's a group of analytics nerds, like the 3 guys in the social network, writing this down on a window somewhere, like the K-rate algorithm at Kirkland, being like, this is how you figure it out, because it was something that became a big deal in the WBC. I remember they were talking about Ohtani was throwing it. Now, obviously, Ab was throwing it. And just to go back to what you said about, their Baseball Savant pages, you're right. They are actually pretty comparable. And what is bizarre about both of them is that if we're just talking about exit velo and hard hit rate, despite how good their stuff is and how many bats they miss, surprisingly week for pitchers of their caliber. Abbott in the 11th percentile on average exit velo. McClanahan, who's a Cy Young favorite, in the 39th. But I think that's one of those things. They pound the zone so much, and when they get hit, they might have a tendency to get hit hard. But you make up for that with tremendous extension. In McClanahan's case, phenomenal velocity, and just the ability to keep pitches in the zone while also missing bats. And it's an invaluable quality to have.
Yeah, and that strike zone's not very big. Holy fuck. I mean, That strike zone is, and we're already up these umpires' asses, but it should be applauded as much as anything for a pitcher is what you're talking about, to create weak contact with the zone and to get swing and miss within the zone. Abbott's interesting enough, too. Again, very undersized guy. And I like that we can use McClanahan as an example early. Yeah. He has given up 8 home runs, I believe, in 51 innings and only 12 starts. So, do I love that? No. But like you're saying, the dude's in the zone. So you're going to get it. He's only got, I think, 16 walks in the same amount of innings. So he's got great ratios across the board. And again, he ain't even supposed to be the guy. Hunter Green's supposed to be the guy. He ain't even supposed, I'm sorry to be so frank about this, but even as good as Andrew Abbott is, there's somebody who's supposed to go to the Hall of Fame. Andrew Abbott's good. Hunter Green has the skill set where we're talking about him 50 fucking years from now.
I mean, we got to ask now, man, if Hunter Green comes back healthy, the Reds win in this division?
I asked, I'm sorry, we had a great moment on the show because I just said, hell, what do you love about this Reds team? He's like, man, are they playing together? They care about each other. Jared Kelenic kicked a water cooler and broke his foot. You're the general manager of the Seattle Mariners. How pissed are you?
Honestly, you're pissed. But it's indicative of the way this season has gone for the Seattle Mariners. Something about them from day one just hasn't been quite right. The guys that you expected to be mainstays, your Cal Raleighs, obviously your Julio Rodriguez's of the world, while not awful, have been somewhere between mediocre to fine. You have a good pitching staff, but at the end of the day, it's a team that kind of lacks the clutch gene. I think what is the biggest killer here, because I've watched this team out of the break. They've been pretty unimpressive. What is the biggest killer is the fact that you had a player in Kelenic who many people, I don't know if it was a majority, but there were people who were starting to entertain the idea of using the B word with him because of how much he struggled in his first 2 seasons. Had an amazing first month, but was becoming a solid major league player that you could rely on in this lineup. And I think he'll be back and he'll recover. A long-term injury like that does hinder your development. It's just that, we've got the Tigers have gone through it with Riley Green. Riley Green hasn't missed a beat, but I'm telling you, he's running a little bit gingerly. Those are reps that you're never going to get back. You can't make up for that lost time. And you could tell Kelenic was crushed. I think that if you're the GM, though, it is but if there's any positive that comes from it, your mindset, I think, is kind of made up regarding what the next several weeks might look like for this organization. I think that they continue to fall back. The Rangers are going to make moves. The Astros are going to make moves. You've had very little offensive consistency, and one of your only true bright spots from an offensive standpoint just broke his foot kicking a water cooler. So it sucks. I mean, I got a fucking broken high school tennis certificate right here that I used when Jason Foley blew a save a few weeks ago. So I understand the frustration, man. It sucks. But
I mean, you're watching the Tigers. This guy's playing for the Mariners. I think there's a little bit of a.
What I'm saying is the frustration is one of those things. In the moment, I guarantee you, immediately he's like, "Why the fuck did I do that?" Of course, the same way that Devin Williams, I think, broke his hand a few years ago. I think it might have been even celebrating a division title. It's just one of those dumb things that you do in the moment that you look back on and say, "Why the fuck did I do that?" And he had to live. I mean, he was really broken up about it.
I think that needs to be mentioned. He was super broken down about it and had really emotional stuff to say, talking about what he had said to his teammates. And so we're sending him good vibes and stuff. Young guy, man. I mean, man, can you remember a younger baseball player or a very young? I think he's 22, 23. That's been judged as much as him. He's done pretty well this year. He had his really hot streak to start. Obviously, cooled down, but just a huge prospect. And the Mets traded him for.
That was the Edwin Diaz Robinson Cano deal, which I think led to more Kelenic bashing coming into the year because Diaz had that transcendent season a year ago, and people were like, see the Mets, they won that deal. People thought it was a disastrous deal, and it added more pressure on him, but he delivered. He was having a very good year, and things go sideways. So ultimately, I think he'll be back. I think that is a team, the Mariners are an example of a team that's just had a not so great year. I don't think there's any like massive shakeup that's required. I think Scott Service is going to be there to stay, but yeah, it's indicative of a very disappointing Mariners campaign.
Okay, I also want to point out for Jared Kelenic, this is kind of preposterous because by the age of 21, so he's so good at baseball. You know, I very much like to emphasize the difference between Major League Baseball and AAA, whereas single A, double A, triple A, these are all just one level, high A, I should say, obviously, into double A. The jump to Major League is 3 levels. There isn't a quadruple A. There isn't 5A. Jared Kelenic in AAA in his career is a 947 OPS in 116 games. You can't just put this guy in AAA. He's gonna ruin AAA pitchers. It's all this. If you put him in Double A, he's gonna have a 1200 OPS. So it's just a concept of like he's gonna have to figure out that he's gonna have to level up in the big leagues.
Yep,
and you can't. He couldn't do it for the Mets. That's okay.
Yep.
He's doing it in Seattle. I guarantee you, when he comes back from this broken foot, whether it's this season, I don't know the extent of the health diagnosis. I wouldn't rush him back, obviously. He's going to fucking torch it, bro. He is going to absolutely torch it whenever he comes back from this broken foot.
I think as a hitter, a prospect he's comparable to is Spencer Torkelson, who was just, only spent 1 full year in the minors, was tearing it up. And, even in his struggles, like this year, there was never any whispers about sending him down because, like, dude, he's just going to go down to AAA. He's just going to kill AAA pitching. And now Torkelson's these guys got a 900 plus OPS over the last just 3 weeks now. So it's like, yeah, some guys it's about development. It takes a while to find it. This will obviously hurt his development, but he'll be back. He'll be all right.
Yeah, Torkelson's got like an 830 OPS in AAA. He didn't spend a lot of time there, 75 games. If he went down there right now, it would literally just be quite a waste of time. So, but it takes unique circumstances for guys like that to develop. It does. Would Jared have been able to, I know the Mets want him right now. I'm sure the Mets, not without the Edwin Diaz, we'll see how he comes back from injury. What I'm saying is the Mets would love to have a young, dynamic, outfielder that they didn't just pay $162 million to, but.
Right.
It's hard. It's just like I shouldn't say impossible, but it's just hard to kind of get to that level of comfort as a player where you can go out and just be yourself every day. The Mets and the Yankees certainly don't offer that. Again, I hate to hammer this. If you didn't listen, Hale Morris talked about that as a player coming up behind Don Mattingly. We have a couple other notes I want to get into here as we're keeping things tight. Spencer Strider's due now. Again, typically American League Fridays, we're breaking this into more stuff I want to hear you talk about. Spencer Strider. 200 strikeouts, fastest guy last year to ever do it. In the history of baseball, fastest guy to 200 strikeouts in a season. If he strikes out 11 over the next 13 innings, he's going to break his own record. I wrote this blog at the start of the year that I do feel a little preposterous about him being the best pitcher of all time. But he is shattering strikeout records at a time when all pitchers want to do is strike people out. It's not like all people want to do is strike out. And he's out there doing it at a preposterously higher rate than anyone in the history of the game. What are your thoughts on how dominant Spencer Strider is to the top of the league? You'd still rather have Framber Valdez, wouldn't you?
Right now, yes. But here's what scares me about Strider. I think there's another gear he hasn't found. Strikeout wise, I think he's going to be a 250 plus strikeout guy consistently per year for the rest of his career. But I've noticed, and I think the game he pitched against the Diamondbacks today is a prime example of that, where through 6 innings, he had 13 strikeouts, had not allowed a run. He walks Corbin Carroll to lead off the inning, I believe gives up a single, then a 3-run home run, and then another home run. I think that he is a tremendous thrower. At some point, and he'll get there because he's in his second year. When he develops the ability, that kind of long-term sustainability to dominate third time through the order, to make sure that the command is consistent and good, he's going to have that Cy Young ceiling. And I know the Braves, they won today, but scuffled a little bit out of the gate in the second half. I worry that he could be one of those guys in September does hit that second wave where it's not only are you striking out 10, but you're also going 7 scoreless. Because for a guy whose stuff is as good as his is, his ERA is surprisingly just solid. It's not overwhelmingly great. It's not sub 2, but it's going to get there at some point, and that's scary. And I think we talked about it even off the air at points. It just shows that the Braves have such a good feel for how they develop their players and making sure that these guys play to their strengths. I do not recall Spencer Strider ever being a top 100 prospect in baseball, a top 5 pitching prospect, but he has tremendous body mechanics. It's very, very clean, easy delivery, quadzilla. I think it might've been you that said he's got great calves. Like that's step one, is getting the body down. Once he figures out just that consistency, he has a multi-time Cy Young ceiling.
Great baseball players often have weird physical attributes. His torso relative to his leg size and all that stuff. He's very much his centaur looking, great butt cheeks, huge legs of a guy who weighs like 280 pounds. Yeah. Much like we've talked before, Jose Ramirez's arms are so short, you can't pitch him inside. There is no inside to Jose Ramirez, is down the middle. And so he swings like a 38-inch bat. You're fucked. There's nothing you can do about it. Spencer Strider, to me, is interesting because does he need to get better in a pitch arsenal, or can he just hone and maximize what he has? At what point, when does he have to come back and say, all right, I'm going to add this and that, I'm going to focus on this, or is the focus just on the fastball? Because hitters say he has the hardest fastball to hit. It's jumping out of the hand, it's rising, it's falling, it's you cannot see the fastball. Major league hitters will say, as hard of a fastball, forcing fastball to hit that you can ever hit. So then can he just continue to focus on that? That's what I think allows him to go out and going to have these seasons where he's striking out 300 consistently, because he's not rolling into opening day with like, well, I got the new changeup grip.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine that guy developing a sweeper, though? I mean, just kind of bring it back full circle, just one more weapon in his arsenal. I as far as pitch repertoire, I'm kind of with you. I don't think there needs, like, in a lot of pitchers, I think ultimately kind of fuck themselves sometimes doing that, where it's like, well, this year I'm going to add a splitter. This year I'm going to add a circle changeup. When it's like Tiger's example, last year at the beginning of the year, Tarek Skubal, got from the splitter grip from Casey Mize. He got 4 starts in, and Chris Fetter, the pitching coach, is like, dude, just go back to your regular changeup grip. I think sometimes pitchers have a tendency to overthink it. With a guy like Strider, I'm not changing repertoire. I'm coming in and saying, this is my stuff. It's a matter of commanding my stuff, getting ahead in counts, and being consistent and durable deep into ball games. And when he gets there, it'll be, it's special. He's already special. He's setting strikeout records. He's doing things. The Braves are a storied organization, and he's doing breaking pitching records. We talk about an organization that sets some pretty good pitchers. It's pretty remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah. It's remarkable how he's fitting in the record books.
Yeah. Yeah. This quickly. He's so young.
Right. The dominance.
Yeah.
Again, everybody's trying to dominate, and this guy's dominating the most. Okay. Another dominant statistic, obviously the home run.
Yep.
Aaron Judge has come out and said, hey, it'd be cool if Shohei did it. Do you think Shohei hit 62 this year?
I don't think he hit 62. I think that his name is so not to say Judge's wasn't, but what always was bizarre to me about Judge last year is that there was never a point where he got the Barry Bonds treatment. I think at a certain point, Ohtani could get there, where it's just like, fuck, if there's any circumstance, just put him on. Because last year, I know that, the Yankees offense, scuffled and, sputtered in October. The Yankees lineup last year was substantially better than what the Angels have once you get past Ohtani. I think at a certain point you're going to get, and I think he'll get 50 if he stays healthy, but I do think you're going to get to a point where it's like, I don't care the circumstances, put him on, take your chances with Mickey Moniak. So I think it'd be amazing it'd be kind of funny, really. The fact that there was such a big deal last year with Judge, and then you have Ohtani right away doing it. So it'd be amazing to see. I think he might push it. We're talking mid-50s, but I think eventually he's going to get that. He's going to get the 4 fingers just way too often. And that on-base percentage will go up, but the power numbers might not. If
he gets traded, he will not break it. If he gets traded, he will not break it. If he does not get traded, he will be very mad. He will be not mad enough to say, like, I'm mad. He will not be going to the press and being like, they should have traded me. We're not talking about that, like, crazy unhinged mad.
Right.
We're talking about that disappointed at the end of the day when it's just him and he's sitting around and he's talking to his old lady or he's talking to his dad. He's just like, I just thought I'd be able to play at the Yankee Stadium this year. I thought this year would be the year, whatever that fucking looks like. And that's how that dude's feeling. If they don't trade him, he's got to be showing up to the ballpark like, fuck it. Yeah. Because it's like, after winning the World Baseball Classic, which a lot of those players had described as like a career defining moment and experience, and think all this shit. Now you just go through all the motions again for 162. I think there's some enough childlike in Shohei, if he doesn't get dealt, where the spitefulness of not having the individual spitefulness of not getting playoff moments is gonna be like, fuck it, I'm going in the history books this year anyways. No World Series, no playoffs, doesn't matter. I'll do it myself.
That is a fair point. You make a good argument there, really, with him, and especially the thing that we're like, contract year, man. Like, much like Judge, I am up. You're not going to trade me? Fine, I'm going to up that value, so because I look forward to laughing at whatever the Angels offer me this offseason. So yeah, that is an interesting. It'd be incredible. It'd be more incredible, obviously, if he was playing. If he did get traded and was like hitting 60 on a team that. If that happened, okay, just bringing it back around to what we talked. Even if he got traded to a National League team and he hit 60 home runs, I bet he'd win American League MVP.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that would be the circumstance where they'd say, dude, I know he only played like 100 games this season, but fuck it. He went to another league and broke the American League record. I think we got to give it to him.
Okay, this last segment I have for the show is under 5 minutes. I need you to talk about 5 different teams. So the first team is the Boston Red Sox. People are mad at us. We're not giving the Boston Red Sox credit for being hot enough. My response to them is you have so many teams in your division that are just as good, and there's nothing that jumps off the page. I am wrong for feeling that way. Why though? Why should we be talking about the Boston Red Sox other than the fact they're 7-3 over their last 10? I believe 15-5 over their last 20 or something sensational.
Well, I think in large part because the media and their fan base made it seem like they were going to be the expansion Mets this year. I mean, the amount of vitriolic hatred regarding the way that they thought this season was going to go kind of got a little bit ridiculous. They have overachieved. They have good players. Now, the problem is, I think you're right. They've had a fine year. Obviously, they're ahead of the Yankees right now, which is, of course, understandably very important to them. But I'm not like upset that we haven't talked about them because I just don't think that I don't see a pathway for them to make a deep World Series run unless they do something, or deep postseason run, I'm sorry, unless they do something drastic at the deadline that would probably require them to unload whatever good pieces they had left in their farm system. And I don't think their GM is going to be able to do that. With that said, I think the future is brighter than some people have let on.
Did the Milwaukee Brewers win you over this weekend? Is a team that's for real and they're going to win the NL Central, or do you think that it's just like a hot little phase? I do want to point out this Cincinnati Reds bounced back and won 2. They dropped 5 in a row out of the gate, and then they came back and won 2 good games against the Giants. Where are you at on the Brewers right now?
My stance is, given the way they've played in the second half so far, I do think they win the NL Central. I think their pitching is going to hold up. Christian Yelich has had a wonderful year. He's not MVP level, but he's reverted back to that fantastic all-star caliber hitter he was for a few years there. Offensively, there's just not enough depth there for me to entertain the possibility that this could be a team that's going to make any sort of deep run. And I've very rarely heard their name be brought up in potential trade pieces at the deadline. I don't know what their farm system looks like, but given the fact I haven't heard much, it gives me the impression that they might not be inclined to really be big sellers. If they made a big push, if they got, they need hitters, but I just mean a big name bat. Fuck it, like it won't happen in division, but let's unload the clip and go get Paul Goldschmidt. It changes my entire perspective about how I feel about that team. But right now, I think their ceiling is what it's been post 2018, which is a 85 to 90 win ball club that can win this division and probably promptly get bounced in the wild card round.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
The Padres just won a world.
No, never done that.
They just won a series. Series. The Padres just won a series in Toronto. Are they sellers though? Should they be selling Juan Soto?
Should, but they won't. I think everything they're doing right now is just too little, too late. I think, and it's not even necessarily a statement about the team. I just think that if you don't trade Soto and Hader, you will be unable to trade anyone in the next several years because you have Tatis, Darvish, and Bogarts locked up for long-term deals that are untradeable. This team is not going anywhere. Even if they get hot, their ceiling is that last wildcard spot. I mean, they had World Series aspirations coming into the year. I would argue it would be better for them right now to unload Soto and Hader. I don't think it'll happen. They do have a series coming up against Comerica, or in Comerica against the Tigers, which scares me because they did play very well against the Jays in Rogers Center. So I think that they will have a very quiet deadline, which ultimately could end up being detrimental for them. And it's bizarre because last year they were the loudest team at the deadline.
Do you think the Orioles are hot enough that we can rank them first in next time's power rankings?
No, not yet. Not yet, but it's ask me a week from now though, because the Braves had a very unimpressive week. They dropped a series to the White Sox, and then they dropped a series to the Diamondbacks. I think with a sweep of the Rays, it's got to be a sweep. The gap between 1 and 2 is significantly closer than I ever thought it would be even a week ago at this point. But I can't go one, man. The Braves, what they did in June and into July, essentially coming fucking close to winning like 20 something games in a row. That's going to carry them for a while, but they're starting to make a bit of a push there for that number one spot. Far and away, right now at least, we'll see what happens the rest of the series. The best team in the American League.
Okay, not a trade that you think will happen. The last thing I want to hear from you, just right now before the news comes out, I'm going to give you a chance. Call your shot, dude. What's a trade no one's talking about? Let's go on record right now. The Castellani brain's been working overtime. He's doing the Excel spreadsheets. I see the fucking numbers getting crunched. What's the trade nobody's talking about that you think is going to happen? I'm going to say it, Ohtani to the Rays. You.
Wow, okay. Let me think. One that nobody is talking about. You know, I alluded to him a second ago, but I think there will. Okay, I don't even know if it makes sense, but this team would empty. Let's say fuck it in division, because I don't know how long he's got left. How about Paul Goldschmidt? This would be I'm sorry, not in division. I fucked up. Going back home to Arizona.
Oh, that's a great one. That's a great one.
It makes sense. Now, Christian Walker's had a wonderful year, but you have the DH now, and really fuck it, it's Paul Goldschmidt. I think, especially because I thought the Diamondbacks out of the gate were very unimpressive in the second half, getting swept by the Blue Jays, and I'm thinking they're kind of trending downward. You go on the road, you win 2 out of 3 in Atlanta. They still believe they can win that division. They have pitching, and I think they'll add a little bit of pitching. But one team, maybe it's Arizona, maybe it's Tampa Bay, maybe it's Baltimore, is going to be to this deadline what the Padres were to last year's deadline, where it's like, we're hurling the middle fingers up at everybody. We're not coming back for a little bit. We're coming back for everything. Give me Goldie back to Arizona, man.
I like that. That's a good one. And I have not heard that before. Let's send Paul Goldschmidt back to Arizona. And let's send you guys to the subscription page. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, appreciate you very much. If you're listening on Spotify or whatever other platform it is, go ahead, throw us that subscription. Throw Castellani 5 stars.
Oh, shucks. Thank you. Yes, I very much appreciate it.
Okay, the hair's wet. It's slick. It feels good. Oppenheimer was a great movie. We have a fucking great review coming, and then obviously huge personal announcement. Trivia team. Yes,
Team Flux will return with you, me, and Joey Camasta. It was something that I feel very important. I feel like we're like the Theo Epsteins of this universe, kind of behind the scenes deals, talking about this because we discussed this idea. After the live show ended for the Final Four, and I knew that me and you were gonna put something together. And honestly, Joey, when we had him on our team last year, I didn't even view it as a trial run. But looking back on it, I guess in a way it kind of was. He fills in a lot of gaps that we might not fill. He's a remarkably likable player. He's funny as fuck. Happy to have the 3 of us together. Hopefully Flux can make a run and we can make y'all proud. Really looking forward to that. Still a ways away. Won't be our first match till October, but there will be a lot of turnover. One good thing, it'll help us develop team chemistry. This team is set in stone. There will not be any trades. There will not be, and people may call. I am hanging up the phone. It's us 3. The rest of the way, we're riding this thing out until we get to October.
Oh, I get it. I see it. There's kids on the dozen that just in the comment section going, "Oh, this team, this and that." Listen, we're coming. Yeah. When we talked about this, it wasn't like, "Hey, it would be a fun exercise." It's like we got the chemistry, we have the knowledge, we have the trust, we have the love, we have the generational span. We have like a 10-year gap here where we cross over. So with the Venn diagram, where I can go 10 years to a place you can't go, you can go 10 years to a place much stronger than I can. So I think there's a really good synergy here with sports information. The other thing too is I'm competitive. I want to win. I want to fucking win. We're spending the time to do this. We record those things at 8 p.m., 9 p.m. You're often telling, in my case, "Hey, honey, don't mind me. I'm just going to go in the back bedroom and yell at the top of my fucking lungs here. Go ahead, put this on pause." So like, we're not just, there's more to it than just like, thanks. Like, oh, gee whiz, this is nice to do something that everybody watches. No, my friends, we are here to win. And that's just the way it is. Oh, the AC kicked on. I like that feeling when you have it set to auto.
That's a perfect sign that we're ready to roll out of here. I feel like, yeah.
All right, so last one. Tigers have who this weekend?
Padres. They got Padres, Angels home series back to back.
Cubs have the Cardinals at home. It happens a couple times a year, but this is one of the best weekends. So I'll be at a couple of the games. Come see me on Friday. This is the Barstool Baseball Show. Like I said, guys, subscribe. Carl and Chris here. Until next time, we'll see you guys then.